Over 4,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, events occurred that would change the course of human history. The independent city-states of Uruk, Ur, Lagash, and Nippur suddenly came under the control of a single ruler. This wasn't just an alliance or temporary coalition, but the creation of a state stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. This marked the birth of the world's first empire, featuring a unified administration, a network of governors, a standing army, and control over trade routes and resources. The Akkadian language became the common language of power and governance across these vast territories. Although this empire lasted only a few generations, it set the stage for a centralized state, later followed by Babylon, Assyria, and Persia. Today we'll explore the rise of this empire and the factors that led to its decline. For countless generations, the Sumerians lived in Mesopotamia, a people whose language is unique with no known relatives. They were the builders of ziggurats, the inventors of cuneiform writing, and the founders of the earliest known civilization. However, in the 3rd millennium BC, a new group arrived in Mesopotamia, the Akkadians, who spoke a Semitic language. They settled in the northern and central regions of Mesopotamia, living alongside the Sumerians for several centuries. The Akkadians adopted Sumerian farming techniques, city planning, culture, and traditions, and quickly learned to write using Sumerian cuneiform. The religions and mythologies of these two groups became so intertwined that today it is often hard to tell Sumerian and Akkadian deities apart. As a result, it's now common to refer to a shared Sumerian-Akkadian culture, mythology, and civilization. During this time, Mesopotamia was a patchwork of many city-states or nomes, with Nippur and Kish being particularly important. The ruler of Nippur held the title Lugal of the Land, and was seen as the southern leader, while the king of Kish was known as the king of the multitudes, and was considered the northern leader of Sumer. City-states were always competing for control over fertile lands and water resources, which led to constant conflicts and almost non-stop warfare. Even if one city managed to conquer another, these victories rarely lasted long, making it hard for stable territorial states to form. As soon as the winning army left, the conquered city would quickly regain its independence, choose a new leader, and assert its autonomy. Religious beliefs played a big role in this, as each city held its own patron deity, and the ruler's power was closely linked to serving this god. In this setting, the idea of one person ruling multiple cities seemed neither obvious nor natural. Conquering a foreign city meant dealing with a different religious cult with its own rituals, hymns, and sacrifices. Without showing proper respect to the patron god, according to Sumerian beliefs, the city would lose divine favor and fall into decline. As a result, a foreign ruler had little chance of gaining true legitimacy in the eyes of the local people. The first to tackle this challenge was Lugalzagesi, the ruler of the city of Umma. He first established himself in Uruk, where he was recognized as king, and then formed a coalition of several cities to take on Kish. After defeating its ruler, Ur-Zurbaba, he forced Kish to acknowledge Uruk's authority. Lugalzagesi continued his military campaign, eventually taking control of all of southern Mesopotamia. To strengthen his rule, he secured recognition as the high priest in the conquered cities, thereby uniting political and religious power. It's likely that, for the first time in history, all of Sumer was under the control of a single ruler. When Enlil, the ruler of the lands, gave the kingdom to Lugalzagesi, he made sure everyone in the nation focused on him, putting the lands under his control from east to west. However, Lugalzagesi's hold on power was weak because he couldn't physically visit all of the cities to perform important religious ceremonies. As a result, local leaders often rose up in different Sumerian cities, declaring independence from Uruk. This was exactly what happened in Kish. After being defeated by Lugalzagesi, Kish lost its prestigious position as the leader of northern Sumer, with the political focus shifting to Uruk. Ur-Zurbaba remained king, but his power was greatly diminished due to the defeat. Around 2316 BC, a man named Shar-Kali, later known as Sargon, emerged in Kish. He wasn't a Sumerian but an Akkadian, working at the court as a gardener and cupbearer. Although these jobs might seem minor, the cupbearer was part of the king's close circle, always near him and highly trusted. Taking advantage of the city elite's dissatisfaction with Ur-Zababa, Sargon led a coup and took control of Kish. He declared himself the rightful heir of the Akkadian kingdom and the chosen one of the goddess Ishtar, who, according to his own account, saved him and guided him to kingship. He describes his background and rise to power in one of his inscriptions. Sargon, the mighty king, king of Akkad am I. My mother was a high priestess. My father I knew not. The brothers of my father loved the hills. My city is Azurpiranu, which is situated on the banks of the Euphrates. My mother, the high priestess, conceived me in secret. She bore me. She set me in a basket of rushes. With bitumen she sealed my lid. She cast me into the river, which rose not over me. The river bore up and carried me to Aki, the drawer of water. Aki, the drawer of water, lifted me out as he dipped his oars. Aki, the drawer of water, took me as his son and reared me. Aki, the drawer of water, appointed me as his gardener. While I was gardener, Ishtar granted me her love, and for 54 years I exercised kingship. The name Sargon means true king in Akkadian. This choice of name raises questions about his legitimate claim to power. A ruler with an undisputed right to the throne usually doesn't need to emphasize legitimacy through his name. So it's likely that adopting such a name was a deliberate political move, a way to assert and secure his claims to power in the public's mind. At this time, Lugalzagesi was busy dealing with a rebellion in Lagash, which kept him from quickly addressing the rise of a new independent ruler in Kish. This delay was crucial for Sargon, giving him the time he needed to consolidate power, strengthen his position, and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. When Sargon came to power, he quickly launched military campaigns against nearby cities, rapidly expanding his rule northward along the Euphrates. In the 4th year of his reign, he set up a new capital, the city of Akkad. Although there had been a settlement there before, it wasn't particularly important. By establishing a new political center, Sargon aimed to separate himself from the established city elites of Kish and other Sumerian centers, choosing instead to rely on his own administration. From then on, he took on the titles of both Lugal of Kish and King of Akkad. Sargon introduced major military reforms that significantly changed the balance of power in the region. At the time, the Sumerian army was made up of city militias, with infantrymen carrying large shields and heavy bronze-tipped spears, and wearing pointed copper helmets. Chariots, pulled by donkeys rather than horses, supported the infantry on the sides since horses had not yet been domesticated at that time. Sargon made archers the core of his army, a move that turned out to be very successful. The archers under Sargon's command moved in a loose formation, allowing them to shower the enemy with arrows while staying agile. If the heavily armed phalanx tried to get close, the archers could quickly fall back, avoiding hand-to-hand combat. The phalanx struggled to chase them because of their bulky gear, and breaking their tight formation made them vulnerable. At the same time, Sargon kept traditional infantry. Behind the archers was his own phalanx, followed by units of axe-wielding warriors. This strategy brought in specialized roles and greatly increased the army's size. Equipping an archer was much less resource-intensive than outfitting a heavy infantryman with a large shield, spear, and helmet. Sargon's records show that 5,400 warriors ate bread before him every day, indicating the presence and size of a permanent professional army. For Mesopotamia at the time, this was a powerful force, as the city militia of an average Sumerian city usually had only a few hundred fighters. Around 2312 BC, the inevitable clash between Sargon and Lugalzagesi turned into open warfare. Attempts to negotiate a peace solution failed, leading to a major conflict between the two states. Lugalzagesi was supported by a coalition of over 50 cities, but Sargon's military reforms gave him the edge in organization, tactics, and numbers. According to his own inscriptions, Sargon claimed victory in 34 battles, though many were probably minor skirmishes. Gradually, he took control of Umma, Uruk, Lagash, and other cities. In Nippur, his authority was recognized, earning him the respected title of Lugal of the land. Lugalzagesi was eventually captured. A cuneiform tablet describes these events as follows. Sargon, king of Akkad, overseer of Inanna, king of Kish, anointed of Anu, king of the land, governor of Enlil. He defeated the city of Uruk and tore down its walls. In the battle of Uruk he won, took Lugalzagesi, king of Uruk, in the course of the battle, and led him in a collar to the gate of Enlil. With Sumer under his control, Sargon launched a campaign to the west. He conquered Mari, Nagar, Yarmuti, and moved into Syria, where he defeated Ebla, the region's most powerful state. The ruler of Ebla acknowledged Sargon's supremacy, securing his control over western trade routes, access to the Mediterranean Sea, and strategically important timber, which was scarce in Mesopotamia, as well as silver deposits in the Taurus Mountains. Sargon himself recorded these achievements in his inscriptions. Dagon gave Sargon the upper land, Mari, Yarmuti, Ebla, all the way to the cedar forest and the silver mountains. Sargon the king, Enlil gave him no rival. After securing control over the western territories, Sargon turned his attention to the east. Beyond the Tigris River lay the foothills of the Zagros Mountains, stretching further into the Iranian plateau where Elam was located, the most advanced of the states neighboring Mesopotamia. The Elamites had large cities and ancient political traditions, while Sumerian and Akkadian texts often depicted them as fierce invaders who frequently launched raids. Archaeological evidence shows that Elam was a highly developed civilization, comparable in many ways to Mesopotamian cultures. Securing these lands was strategically important for Sargon. Trade routes ran through Elam, bringing tin for bronze production, copper, semi-precious stones, and other resources from the Iranian plateau to Mesopotamia, as well as overland routes leading to the Indus Valley civilization. Beyond economic interests, Sargon wanted to ensure the security of his eastern borders. During this campaign, he organized one of the earliest recorded naval expeditions in history. His fleet left from the port of Guba on the Persian Gulf coast, traveled up the Karun River, and captured Susa, the main city of lowland Elam, along with the surrounding territories. The rapid advance of the Akkadians forced the Elamite rulers to come together. The king of Awan, Kish-Rishini, gathered an army, and the eastern kingdom of Marhashi sent an additional force led by Prince Dagu. Despite their efforts, the combined forces were defeated. After this victory, Sargon, as noted in one inscription, took on the title King of the World, Conqueror of Elam and Marhashi. There's no evidence that he moved further east. He was likely satisfied with the recognition of his supremacy and the payment of tribute. As a result, about 65 Elamite cities came under his control, and his empire stretched over 1,500 kilometers, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Persian Gulf. He established trade links with Cyprus, the Indus Valley regions, and the island of Dilmun. After conquering vast territories, Sargon faced the same challenges as those before him. Once the army left a conquered city, it often tried to regain its independence. Each center had its own patron deity, priestly elite, and established political traditions. No conqueror could simply declare himself the ruler of many such cities and expect unconditional acceptance. However, Sargon proved to be not only a brilliant military strategist, but also a skilled administrator. He created a system of governorship. His appointees, known as the Ensi, and sometimes referred to in the sources as Sons of Akkad, were placed in the conquered cities. Their social status was crucial. These were individuals of non-noble origin whose careers depended entirely on the king. For the society of that time, this was a groundbreaking move. Sargon opened the door to power for people who had previously never reached high office, turning away from entrenched hereditary elites and placing his trust in governors personally loyal to him. Still, he couldn't completely dismantle the local nobility. Ancient aristocratic families kept their influence, and certain cities, especially Kish, continued to exist with their own dynasties. To keep them in check, Sargon used the practice of hostage-taking. the heirs of local rulers were brought to the capital, and their fate served as a guarantee of their parents' loyalty. Addressing the religious challenge was just as important, as it had previously made it difficult to maintain control over foreign cities. Sargon cleverly appointed his daughters as high priestesses in the main temples of conquered areas. The most famous of these was Enheduanna, whom he had placed in charge of the temple complex dedicated to the god Nana in one of Sumer's richest religious centers. This allowed him to control large temple estates, which had traditionally been the main power base for the local priesthood. Sargon's daughters skillfully learned local hymns, rituals, and traditions, gaining the religious legitimacy that Sargon himself lacked. Enheduanna, beyond her religious role, left a significant literary legacy. She's recognized as the first known author in world literature whose name and works have survived. Most of her hymns praise the goddess Inanna, known to the Akkadians as Ishtar. Sargon also introduced a series of reforms to unify the diverse conquered territories into a single administrative unit. The Akkadian language was made the official language for documents and business, gradually replacing Sumerian in administration. Across the state, standards for measuring length and weight were established, making trade and tax accounting easier. After completing his major conquests, Sargon demobilized a large part of the army, redirecting it to build new irrigation canals. This increased the amount of farmable land and boosted agricultural production, while the waterways also served as transport routes for trade, mail, and quick troop movements. Sargon ruled for 54 years, during which large-scale irrigation and relative stability led to population growth in Mesopotamia, increased urban wealth, and unprecedented trade expansion. However, long rule had its challenges. The local nobility and descendants of displaced dynasties remained resentful over their loss of power, and the growing population intensified competition for resources. Towards the end of Sargon's life, uprisings became more frequent throughout the empire, hinting at the crisis his successors would have to face. In 2279 BC, after Sargon the Great died, his empire was rocked by widespread uprisings. During his 54-year reign, Sargon had kept the state unified, mainly through his own authority. But after his death, cities started to reject the new ruler, thinking that while they had followed Sargon, his successor hadn't yet proven himself. Sargon's son Rimush took the throne, inheriting a vast but shaky empire. The first wave of revolts hit the Sumerian south and eastern regions. Uruk, Adab, Lagash, Umma, and other cities kicked out their Akkadian governors and appointed their own leaders. At the same time, a rebellion flared up in Elam. Rimush responded with brutal force. His records tell of thousands killed and tens of thousands captured in each campaign. He not only regained control over the cities, but also tore down their walls, leaving them unable to resist again. Unlike Sargon, who sometimes allowed some autonomy, Rimush wiped out any trace of independence, replacing local rulers with his own appointees. In one inscription he states, "Rimush, king of the world, in battle over Adab and Zabalam, was victorious, and 15,718 men he struck down, and 14,576 captives he took. Further, Meskigala, governor of Adab, he captured, and Lugalzagesi, governor of Zabalam, he captured. He conquered their two cities and destroyed the walls of both of them." Elsewhere it's noted, 12,650 men he struck down, 5,864 captives he took by his hand. He captured every city in the land of Elam and brought down their walls. Despite his military victories, Rimush couldn't protect himself from conspiracy. According to later accounts, he was murdered by courtiers, beaten to death with clay tablets. After his death, power shifted to his brother, Manishtushu, who continued the fight against separatism but focused on weakening the economic power of local elites. He launched a campaign of massive forced land purchases from them. This is documented by the so-called Black Obelisk of Manishtushu, which records the king's acquisition of vast tracts of land, covering more than 3,000 hectares, for a sum equivalent to about 2 years' harvest. It's doubtful these transactions were entirely voluntary. Refusing to sell land to the king could have dangerous consequences. However, Manishtushu also met a violent end. Around 2254 BC, Naram-Sin, the grandson of Sargon, took the throne of Akkad. He inherited a state worn out from constant rebellions and faced the empire's most severe crisis at the start of his reign, the so-called Great Rebellion. Unlike previous uprisings handled by Rimush and Manishtushu, this rebellion was well coordinated. Several centers simultaneously declared their own kings. In Kish, they elevated Kish. In Uruk, Amogilida, and each gathered a broad coalition of smaller cities around them. Naram-Sin found himself surrounded by enemies. The cities of Sumer, Elam, and even Kish itself, the city where Sargon began his journey, revolted. However, military fortune favored Naram-Sin. Within 1 year, he won 9 major battles and defeated his opponents. He reports on the campaign against the Northern Coalition. Naram-Sin the Mighty, king of Agade, when the 4 quarters of the earth attacked him together, through the love of Ishtar bore him, was victorious in 9 battles in a single year, and captured the kings whom they had raised up against him. A similar fate awaited the Southern Coalition led by Zamar-Girid. Emerging from this crisis, Naram-Sin not only secured victory, but also strengthened his rule, which now relied on both dynastic succession and personal military skill. After the Great Revolt, he took an unprecedented step in Mesopotamian tradition by declaring himself a god. Before Naram-Sin, no Mesopotamian ruler had claimed personal divinity. Kings fought in the name of gods, declaring themselves chosen and servants, but never equated themselves with the divine. Naram-Sin boldly crossed this line. In official inscriptions, a cuneiform star sign, previously reserved for deities, appears before his name. On reliefs and steles, he's shown wearing a horned helmet, a symbol exclusively associated with gods. He took on the title God of Akkad, and a temple dedicated to him was built in the capital. This move had a practical purpose. Neither Rimush nor Manishtushu had figured out a way to ensure unconditional recognition of a central authority across the empire. Deification elevated Naram-Sin above local cults. He was no longer a foreigner honoring a foreign god, but became a deity worthy of worship throughout the entire subordinate territory. On the famous stele of Naram-Sin, found in Susa, he is depicted atop a mountain in a horned helmet, trampling the defeated warriors of the Lubi mountain tribe, a scene previously reserved only for gods. The people of Akkad initiated the deification of Naram-Sin. According to the inscription on the copper statue, they petitioned the gods of various cities to recognize Naram-Sin as their city's deity, which led to the building of a temple in his honor. After solidifying his power within the state, Naram-Sin adopted an expansionist policy. To the west, he conquered the cities of Ebla and Armanum, which were once thought to be unbeatable. In one of his inscriptions he declares, "Since the beginning of time, no king has ever destroyed Armanum and Ebla. With Nergal's weapon, I, Naram-Sin, forged my path, and Nergal granted me Armanum and Ebla, along with Amanus, the Cedar Mountains, and the Upper Sea." To the east, he strengthened his hold over Elam by setting up an Akkadian garrison and appointing a governor in Susa. The preserved text on the treaty between Naram-Sin and the Elamite ruler Kita includes a formula that became a classic element of international diplomacy in the ancient East. Naram-Sin's enemy is my enemy, and his ally is my ally. Following Sargon's policy, he appointed his daughters to important priestly positions. Tutanabshum became the high priestess of Enlil and Nippur. Eminana led the cult of the god Nana in taking over from her aunt Enheduanna, and Shumshani became the high priestess of the sun god Utu. He married off other daughters to rulers of vassal states like Urkesh and Mari, using these marriages to integrate controlled territories. At the height of his power, Naram-Sin ruled the largest state known at that time and held the title King of the Four Corners of the World, and likely saw his authority as unchallengeable. Around 2218 BC, Naram-Sin's son, Shar-Kali-Sharri, took the throne. Unlike previous power transitions, this one probably happened without bloodshed, indicating that Naram-Sin had prepared his heir for leadership ahead of time. Shar-Kali-Sharri joined his father on military campaigns and was responsible for rebuilding Ekkur, the main sanctuary of the god Enlil in Nippur, the most revered temple center in Mesopotamia at the time. Hundreds of craftsmen worked on the project: goldsmiths, carvers, carpenters. Large amounts of copper and bronze were used, along with cedar wood brought from distant mountainous areas. The project was completed after Naram-Sin's death. However, the stable beginning of Shar-Kali-Sharri's reign was short-lived. The empire faced pressure from multiple sides. In the west, the Amorites, Semitic tribes from the Jebel Bishri area in central Syria, became active. In the east, the Elamites, taking advantage of weakened Akkadian control, regained independence and launched deeper raids into Mesopotamian territory. The greatest threat came from the Gutians, a people from the central regions of the Zagros, about whom little information has been preserved. They didn't have a written tradition of their own, and all information about them comes from the texts of their adversaries, the Akkadians, Sumerians, and later Assyrians. Their language is known only from a few names of rulers and doesn't show a clear connection to Semitic languages, Sumerian, Elamite, or Hurrian. The origin of the Gutians and the structure of their society remain topics of debate. Here's how the Akkadians themselves described the Gutians. Enlil brought out of the mountains those who do not resemble other people, who are not reckoned as part of the land, the Gutians, an unbridled people with human intelligence but canine instincts and monkey's features. Like small birds, they swooped on the ground in great flocks. Because of Enlil, they stretched their arms out across the plain like a net for animals. Nothing escaped their clutches, no one left their grasp. The earliest records of conflicts with them date back to the reign of Naram-Sin. In a later literary account, it's claimed that his army of 360,000 warriors defeated the Gutian king Gutian, though at the cost of 90,000 men. While these figures are likely exaggerated, they highlight the perception of the Gutians as a formidable and dangerous adversary even then. During Shar-Kali-Sharri's reign, confrontations escalated, and the threat posed by Gutians became increasingly real. Two of his year names, which were formulas for dating documents, directly reference these events. One mentions the capture of the Gutian king Sharlag, and the other the subjugation of the Gutians. However, these triumphant declarations did not reflect the true state of affairs. Despite proclaimed victories, Akkadian dominance waned, and the Gutian presence in Mesopotamia only grew stronger. Notably, some Mesopotamian cities, tired of Akkadian rule, welcomed the Gutians, or at least did not resist them. The animosity towards central authority was so deep that some centers preferred to seek protection from the Gutians or Elamites, rather than remain under Akkadian control. To them, the Gutians were less invaders, and more of a convenient counterbalance to the disliked Akkad. The Gutians eventually took control of a significant portion of Mesopotamia, establishing the ancient Sumerian city of Adab as their center. One Gutian ruler, Eridupizir, left an inscription in Nippur, in which he emulated his predecessors by calling himself King of Gutium, King of the Four Corners of the World. However, the true context of their control remains a hot topic of debate. In addition to external threats, natural factors played a role. Geological studies suggest that at the end of Shar-Kali-Sharri's reign, Mesopotamia and much of the Near East suffered a prolonged drought that could have lasted over a decade. For an agrarian society entirely reliant on irrigation farming, this was a devastating blow to the very foundations of existence. Crop failures undermined the economy, heightened social tensions, and complicated the maintenance of a large army and extensive administrative apparatus. A later literary text, The Curse of Akkad, captures the memory in these challenging years. As if it had been before the time when cities were built and founded, the large arable tracts yielded no grain. The inundated tracts yielded no fish. The irrigated orchards yielded no syrup or wine. The thick clouds did not rain. The magurum plant did not grow. Under such circumstances, it's difficult to imagine any ruler holding the empire together. Shar-Kali-Sharri ruled for 25 years, but after his death, the state slipped into irreversible political chaos. In the space of just 3 years, 4 kings came and went. a clear sign of a deep crisis and a fierce struggle for power. After them, the Sumerian king list mentions 2 more kings of Akkad, Dudu and his son Shudurul, who together reigned for 36 years. Even so, we do not know how much territory they actually controlled beyond the city of Akkad itself. There's no evidence that the rulers who followed Shar-Kali-Sharri belonged to Sargon's dynasty, which is why most scholars consider him the last representative of that line. In the end, Akkad declined and the center of political power shifted south to Uruk. The city of Akkad, the empire's capital, was destroyed, and its exact location remains unknown. According to one theory, it might have been destroyed or washed away due to a change in the Tigris's course. It may never be found. By around 2150 BC, only ruins and memories recorded on clay tablets were left of what was once the greatest state of the ancient world.
If you made it to the end of this video, we really appreciate it if you liked and subscribed. Follow along on our journey through ancient civilizations and history. If you'd like to support the channel, join our Patreon or become a YouTube channel member. You get early access to new episodes, behind-the-scenes looks, and more. You can also leave a super thanks below to give us a little extra boost. If you want to listen to history on the go, check out our all-new podcast, Parabellum History. You can find it on all major podcast platforms. Thanks again for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time.